everyone, it's me again, and today, I don't know what that was. Oh God. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent influx of Tradwife content blowing up on TikTok and the sad state of post-Elon Musk purchase Twitter. But first, links, sources, ways to support the channel all down below, including Patreon, YouTube memberships, Amazon wishlist, the whole nine. There's also links to my socials, the makeup that I'm wearing, and yeah, just the vibes. There's also an email to suggest content. So together, we're going to go back to the good old days. Sorry. Lose the ability. Oh. Together, we go back to the good old days. Lose the ability to have a lower register. Have breakfast at 6 p.m. again because mom decided that she was going to make Captain Crunch from scratch for the third time this week. And remembers, ladies, no wearing pants. That's my girl voice question mark. You'll see when we get more into it. There will be 3 parts of the video today. Part 1, what is a Tradwife anyway? Part 2, TikTok and Twitter Tradwives. And Part 3, the dark side of this kind of movement and the thought processes around it. So in that, let's get right into the video. Part 1, what even is a Tradwife anyway? Tradwife is the words traditional and wife put together, referring to a sort of 1950s housewife aesthetic, following traditional, typically fundamentalist, not exclusively, but very often Christian doctrine in the belief system, and the typical nuclear family model of husband, wife, 2 to 3 children roughly. Tradwife as a concept is more so an internet term and kind of phenomenon rather than like an actual thing kind of documented in books and history and things like that. Usually they say like traditionalist values, conservative values, heteronormative dynamic marriages, things along that line. These traditional values exist as the antithesis of what feminism stands for, and at its deepest, darkest roots finds, at least for this kind of internet version of this, it's roots in sort of 4chan adjacent incel logic. From this, I mean the conversations around the innate conditions of man and woman, and the way that all men and women want certain things, in the sense of that the men are by nature assertive leader figures, and women are docile, submissive people who work to serve their husbands and bear the children. As an example, I'm going to show you that these are some of the memes that you get, the sort of kind of Wojak, Chad, Veronica kind of vibe. If you want to kind of know more about like the basis of the red pill community and this like incel logic, Noah Samson has really good videos on it. Those are ones that would be good to watch. All the memes for this sort of align with that kind of red pill community, Chad, Sigma kind of thing as well, where it's like more manly, more leader authority structure. If you are someone who has that wife that submits to you, your strength as a man is based on those who submit to you, rather than your ability to work with people, your ability to have self-control, your ability to regulate your own emotions. None of that is like relevant. It's all about kind of how you can get someone to submit to you. That aspect of it specifically, we're going to put a pin in, boop, because we're actually going to get back to that a little bit down the line. Obviously, the concept of traditional marriages existed long before the internet. We know this. It is something that formed kind of the basis of many components of internet culture. As a result of it forming the basis of internet culture in this neck of the woods specifically, it is because it built its parameters, or it's built its bricks or base foundations. Yes, foundations. It built its foundations through how it structured American culture. So this book, which I read all the time, and there's a reason why I read this all the time, because this book talks about how the modern American society is structured around evangelical Christian values, and how the fear of losing these values despite their immense power and prominence is what leads a lot of discourse between political parties in America today, a lot of discourse around what's a culture of Americanism, what the American dream is, the late and kind of what puts us in the docile position of just dealing with late stage capitalism, but a lot of people do. There has been this narrative, especially since the dawn of like modern feminism, specifically like Western white liberal feminism, that presents anything that differs from this path of traditionalism as a means of like destroying the nuclear family. And a lot of people will, of course, use things like slippery slopes and hyperbole to kind of make this seem legitimate by saying the death of the marriage is the death of the childbirth. There will be no birth rate. And they cite things like the birth rate going down. However, the birth rate goes down for all groups. Even married people aren't having kids as much. Everybody's not having kids as much. And that has nothing to do necessarily with the fact that the regular nuclear family isn't existing. The regular nuclear family can no longer economically sustain itself. Because the regular, this sort of nuclear family American dream model depends on mom and dad, right? 2 people. But dad is able to afford a single family home, pay for 2 kids, and support his wife as well, because she will not be working, right? Now think of it this way. In Canada, and this is not being dramatic, I think it's just a lot of people don't realize how abhorrent the housing market is here. In the provinces of Ontario and British Columbia, in any of the major cities, a single family home will range anywhere from $1.2 to about $2.5 million easily. And when I say single family home, I mean like 2-bedroom bungalow. I mean like 2 or 3 bedrooms to 2 bathrooms, 1 floor and a basement. Like, I'm dead ass. Especially in Vancouver, it's even worse. Even in the province of Quebec, a 2-bedroom condo moment can range $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 easily. There are little townhouses are $1 million in like the richer areas. So imagine being able to work a 9 to you're supposed to be able to work a regular 9 to 5. Your wife doesn't work at all. Regular 9 to 5 here too, by the way, ranges between average 60. Actually, it's 48 because that's what a teacher's wage is as they start. And I know a lot of people who work office jobs work 48,000 ish, 48,000 to roughly 85. That's kind of your average. Some could go up closer to 100, but they don't really surpass 100 that often. Regular 9 to 5 jobs that you need with, let's say, college, because college is different in Canada. If you're thinking American way, like community college, to undergraduate level amount of education required. Even then, in the province of Quebec, if you're a teacher with a master's degree, you start at about 53,000 Canadian dollars a year. Now, if you want to know how much that is in baseball, hot dog, what else do Americans like? Fahrenheit dollars. Take 20, if you want to convert, this is just a tip in general. It's rough, obviously, but take off 25%. That's your US dollars. Because Canada usually is between 71 and 75 cents to the dollar in the US. So let's say $50,000. That's not a good number. Let's do 100,000 Canadian dollars is 75,000 US roughly. So think of it that way. 53,000. That's 40-ish. That's a really rough estimate, but it's about $40,000 a year US. So with a master's degree. So and houses are $1 million. Things are great. Everything's good. The threat to the nuclear family is in turn hyperbolically linked to the downfall of society in many instances. This comes from 2 things. 1, the American dream with the wife, the approximately 2 to 3 children, the single family home, the man who supports the family and raises the kids. This needs to have also a heteronormative, typically God-fearing dynamic as well. The second thing is America presents itself as at the heart of modern popular culture. Hollywood is in the United States. Major record labels, Sony Music, Warner Brothers, all that kind of stuff exists in the United States. Most popular artists in the world, a lot of them do come from the United States. Popular actors come from the United States. Film festivals, social media, a majority of social media platforms find their roots in the United States. Google, which Google's not social media, but Google is everything, right? Facebook, I believe Snapchat was also founded in the United States. The only powerhouse to the huge platforms that exist right now is TikTok's not found in the United States. And genuinely, I feel like if you unpack the kind of US Congress discussions around TikTok, a lot of it seems way more about how they're butthurt that they don't have that capital and they don't have that drive from that social media platform as opposed to it being related to safety purposes. Because if it was related to safety purposes, Facebook would be in there. Facebook would be in there, Snapchat would be in there, Twitter would be in there, everybody would be in that courtroom or that House meeting or whatever, Congress meeting. Think of it that way as well to a certain degree. This kind of linking to the United States' grip on popular culture and social media culture, then in turn kind of floods itself into social media discourse. Now, I feel like a lot of people want to say this is a stretch. I just want you to think about how many of these mommy vloggers, how many of these Tradwives, how many of these content creators are American, and if not American, live very American dream idealized lives. So even if they're in Canada, I know this is anecdotal, of course, but I know a lot of people who are like hyper conservative that are in these sorts of like fundamentalist ideological lives because of where I grew up, and they love Republicans. They love Republican rhetoric, even though we don't have Republicans here. That doesn't exist. Those are the same people that will say that they're Canadian. They're like, I have a right to free speech. No, you don't. We don't have that. It's different. It's different. It's I believe it's section 2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's a completely different thing. It's just how they idealize this American perspective. And and I think something that's unique to Quebec and a lot of people don't know, English conservative Quebecois love America. They love the United States because Quebec is very European. From the way public transit works, to the way the education system's funded, to the way that taxes are done, to the way that prescriptions and medications are covered, to the way that the taxes are very, very high, to the way that social services are very robust, to the way that the cities are designed, the culture that exists in the cities. And that is the antithesis of America, right? America at its roots rejects Europe, rejects England, rejects that's something also I just noticed is like, a lot of the conservative English Quebecois that I know is like they love America. So that's like at how strong that pull is on this sort of dynamic and the power of fear that it can pull. So I'm going to read a small section again, and down like right here you can see what pages I'm reading and stuff. In addition to larger economic challenges, a number of developments at the national level appeared to threaten the stability of a God-given gender order. In 1971, Congress passed the Bipartisan Comprehensive Child Development Bill with the purpose of establishing a national daycare system to help working parents. It was only thanks to Paul Buchanan, a conservative Catholic White House aide, who denounced the plan as one that would bring about the Sovietization of American children, that Nixon vetoed the bill. Conservatives saw the legislation both as a socialist scheme to replace parents with the federal government and as an attack on American motherhood. This is what I mean. Because even if we're talking about Quebec again, Quebec has provincial $7 a day daycare. They have that exact daycare program that they're calling like a communist scheme. In 1972, the same year Congress overwhelmingly approved the ERA, they also passed Title 9. I'm so bad with Roman numerals. It's IX. I think that's 9. As part of the education... Is X 10 or is V... Good God, I'm an idiot. I'll put it on screen. As part of the Education Amendment Act, prohibiting sex discrimination in federally funded schools. In 1973, the Supreme Court established women's constitutional rights to an abortion in Roe v. Wade. Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. I'm speechless. Hold on. Okay. Together with the growing power of the feminist movement, this series of events appeared to evangelicals to be a coordinated assault on traditional God-ordained gender roles. In 1975, Dobson took it upon himself to articulate the critical difference between men and women. Males and females differ biochemically, anatomically, and emotionally, he asserted. In truth, they are unique in every cell of their bodies. He portrayed this distinction in stark terms. Men like to hunt and fish and hike in the wilderness, while women prefer to stay at home and wait for them. I've read part of this before, I know. As soon as I'm hearing that, I'm like, that's very familiar. But something else to notice is citation where. Where is it in men's biological foundations they like to go fishing? Like, if you step back for like 10 seconds, it sounds so stupid. Like, men played sports and women watched, yawning on the sidelines. But perhaps the most profound difference between men and women, according to Dobson, was their source of self-esteem. Men derive self-esteem by being respected. Women feel worthy when they are loved. 5 years later, in his book Straight Talk to Men and Their Wives, he expanded on this theme. Echoing Maribel Morgan, he explained that because of men's fragile ego and enormous need to be respected, together with a woman's vulnerability and need to be loved, it was a mistake to tamper with the time-honored relationship of a husband as a loving protector and a wife as a recipient of that protection. Dobson championed distinct gender roles and identities for the sake of marriages, but also for the sake of the nation. We must not abandon the biblical concept of masculinity and femininity at this delicate stage of our national history, Dobson implied. Writing in 1975, he had asserted that the future of the nation depended without question on how it sees its women. He denounced feminist propaganda behind the media depictions of women as tough, albeit gorgeous, figures who could dismantle any man alive with her karate chops and flying kicks to the teeth, who could shoot with deadly accuracy and play tennis or even football like a pro. Oh yeah, this baby has come a long, long way, no doubt about that, he wrote A Thinly Veiled Revolution. By the end of the 1970s, Dobson had turned his attention to men. He blamed feminists for calling into question everything traditionally masculine, for tampering with the time-honored roles of the protector and protected. Most perniciously, they had denigrated masculine leadership as macho, leaving men in confusion and the nation in peril. The media, too, had colluded with feminists to portray the macho man as an anarchism. The demeaning portrayal of men in popular sitcoms was part of a concerted attack on maleness. All this left men in a state of confusion over their role. Will he march off to defend his homeland in times of war, or will his wife be the one to fight the foreign soil? Should he wear jewelry and satin shoes or carry a purse? Alas, is there anything that marks him as different from his female counterparts? Again, there's like such a deep entrenched fear in any blurring of that separation, and they say that it threatens the nation. It threatens the nation because of the construction of the values and the ways that conservatives fuel into specific economic aspects, such as like, non-renewable energy, and there's so many deeper entrenched like side tangents to that. This book gets into a lot of those as well. Tradwife content by design focuses on this opposition. The women manufacture a crisis, as if all women who are not married, work their own jobs, or are not necessarily like heteronormative relationships cannot have kids or families, and it won't happen. And as a result, there will be some sort of like underpopulation masculinity crisis. But now that we have our bearings in like what we're kind of looking at, let's move to part 2. So part 2, TikTok and Twitter Tradwives. Unless you've been living under a rock, or you don't live your life in the depths of the internet and actually like do stuff, you have seen this woman. This is NARS Smith. In TikTok stitches and duets, quote tweets, comment sections, or overly edited YouTuber commentary videos. This woman, NARS Smith, is a Mormon married to this man named Lucky, who many have said in videos and stuff that I was watching was some sort of like Tumblr model type. NARS Smith has faced a lot of criticism for posting content that many consider to be religious propaganda.
Let's make some lasagna from scratch. It was a gloomy day outside, so what better way to spend it than cooking a comforting meal? I started off by making my mozzarella cheese. I added some milk, citric acid, and ran it to my pot, let that sit, and then sliced it all up. Transferred my curds to a cheesecloth to let all the whey drain out. Let that sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then when all the whey was drained out, I added it back to the pot with my heated up whey and stretched it. Once it was shiny and smooth, I formed it into a ball and placed that in some cold water. Then I made a really simple pasta dough with some eggs, flour, olive oil, and salt. Kneaded that until it was all smooth, and then wrapped it in some plastic wrap to rest for about 30 minutes to an hour. My favorite part of cooking any meal is chopping, so we started chopping up some carrots really finely, some celery, and some onion. You can use purple onion or white onion. I just love a good purple onion. And then I browned my meat in my Dutch oven. Add my vegetables, some tomato paste, some crushed tomatoes, and some herbs. I let that simmer for about 30 minutes to 45 while I prep my lasagna sheets. I cut my dough into 8 pieces and then rolled them out into rectangles. When it was about time to assemble, I made a quick bechamel sauce to go in between my layers, and then started putting it all together. I put down a layer of the ragu, some bechamel, then my lasagna sheets, and then kept repeating that until I reached the top. At this point, I took my mozzarella, sliced it up, and layered it on top. I decided to only do 1 layer, but feel free to add any other cheese that you want. And then I popped that in the oven for 35 minutes and pulled it out, and it came out so perfect. But since I couldn't wait, I burnt my tongue with that first bite.
But there are a lot of people who are also beginning to push back on this aspect. There's actually been a lot of pretty controversial conversations in regards to this. This, by the way, I believe stems from the cultural connection between the American identity and Christian faith, and the health of the American nationalist mission in conjunction with that faith. So I kind of sit in the middle of the NARS Smith argument because on one hand, the focus on her content is not on religion. There are occasional fleeting mentions of going to church or reading scripture, but that's not at the root of everything that she's doing. there are many other tradwife, traditional women, whatever, that are way more directly related to the church, and they tie things together, like being a good mother is based on being religious, and there is a moral soundness, and they will be good people because they're Christian, while all of the other heathens are going straight to the burning pits of hell or something along that line. You know what I mean? Think of people like Brittany Dawn, Girl Defined, the mommy vloggers, Ruby, Frankie. Like, the religious component is for a lot of those people the direct citation for like their subservience, and their subservience to their man and subservience to God. If we compare NARS Smith to someone like these people, it's not the same at all. But the other hand, I understand the sort of concept of misrepresentation of motherhood and of being a wife, right? Because the other thing is, and this is something that a lot of people will touch on but not quite dig enough into, men compare their lives to these women. And I would arguably say a lot of the times, insecure men want a live-in maid. That's as simple as it is. They want this perfect, beautiful representation of someone who cooks and cleans while they're gone. They come back to a clean home. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to lift a finger. But then they also have someone to have relations with. They have someone to continue their bloodline. There's this kind of deep, oftentimes selfish root at the base of this. And this is not what I'm saying that like all men have innately. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that's a lot of the roots of these conversations. It's like, well, I work hard. I want to come home to a clean home. But economically, it is very unlikely that you make the money to do this. These same men will be like, women are gold diggers. Women just want money from me. But I want a woman who will live at home and cook and clean for me, but I can't afford to house both of us, so she better also have a job. Well, then you just want a maid and a baby machine. Like, because the thing is that the levels of expectation and the levels of like any balance in the relationship is just completely out of the window. How are you supposed to not have money and be valued for not having money, but your value is based on how you order around this person, to which they also need to have their own money, but they also have to do all of the domestic labor on top of that while you sit on your ass. And again, this is just some of these like internet personas, internet conversations, internet thought processes in these sort of incel, Reddit, 4chan, Twitter kind of ends of the internet. It's not that this is the general thought process of all relationships. That's not what I'm saying at all. Online conversations tend to be kind of over-dramatized versions of these things. And then I want to kind of keep that in mind as well. But these sorts of conversations, when especially young people become influenced to them, especially men, can be very dangerous, because the thing is that if women do currently have the rights to not have to accept that as their reality, which then fuels into the male loneliness epidemic, where men feel like they've been wronged because these areas of the internet have told them that this is what they deserve and this is the life that they should lead, but women don't want to concede to that anymore, which is kind of what the sort of evil feminist agenda has shaped us into, or whatever, you know? Which I'm obviously doing this because I don't think feminism is evil. I actually am a feminist and I think it's a valuable thing. And now that I've said that line, we're going to have someone call me, pause the video, person who's going to comment, fat, ugly, single, my parents are divorced, my dad doesn't love me, whale, godless, maybe promiscuous. That might be a mix. But that's what the comments we're going to get now that I've said that line, because that's what always happens. Now, I also want to add, I like my dad and I get along fine. My parents are not divorced. I've been in a relationship for 4 years with a man, actually. I work, he works. He's cleaning right now, actually, while I'm working. Bodied. Anyway, let's continue. With the issue with NARS Smith too, which I have seen touched on slightly in other videos as well, is this aspect of comparison that exists between her and other women, right? This misrepresentation of like motherhood. She sits there in these like beautiful flowing gowns and robes to make these like random foods from scratch to a point that no normal person even considers making from scratch. If I say I'm making pizza from scratch, for example, when I say that, I mean I'm making the dough, I'm making the sauce, and I might prepare whatever meat I want to put on there. But if it's like pepperoni or something, I'm buying that from the store, you know? If it's like, I'm not making the cheese either. I'm not making like the oil that I gotta drizzle. You know what I mean? It's like there's levels to these things, and she just goes to like this like very, very, very deep extent. Like making her own, like I said, making her own cheese, making her own sandwich bread dough and bread to make grilled cheese, PB&J sandwiches, makes the peanut butter, makes the jam, makes sometimes, I think one time she made butter to make something. It's like no normal person does this with as much frequency when they have 2 young children, especially because most people are not profiting off of doing this as an action. So there's a mix between drama and rage bait that comes from kind of this end of the internet, which is also tends to be deep into like that fundamentalist ideology, kind of tradwife end of the internet. So that's kind of why Nara gets like mixed in, right? And also there's the occasional, you know, racist, fatphobic undertones sprinkled in there, you know, oh, these conservative women are beautiful and liberal blue-haired, non-binary they-thems or whatever are all ugly or all whatever. This is, again, another kind of discourse that was just really prominent in 2016, that because men from that era that were deep in, you know, that end of the internet look like this now. It's... that was such a shady... They want to bring back those values, especially when they're seeing them kind of come forth with popularity. X, formerly and still widely called Twitter, post Elon Musk purchase has become 4chan clone, where instead of all of it being based on anonymity, people are putting their whole face and government name on that shit. And here are some tweets that are currently circulating on there that I've bookmarked for this occasion. Here is friend of the channel Ryan Beard replying to a tweet with Sydney Sweeney, where the Sydney Sweeney tweet says from a guy named Richard Hanania, whole face and government name, as I mentioned, who is apparently the author of a book called The Origins of Woke. What if just a few laws are responsible for the left and for the left conquering American culture? Meanwhile, there's a whole book that I would argue is probably way better cited that talks about how Republicans have remained very, very, very prominent and powerful in the American culture. But anyways, so this man says, Sydney Sweeney at the GLAAD Media Awards. Liberals have lost control of even the gayest institutions. This has been a recent dialogue that I genuinely don't understand. It's like pretty girl with boob, conservative happy. Are y'all like cavemen? You know, it reminds me of the South Park episode. A picture of the one that I'm thinking of right now. It's like the weird Sydney Sweeney discourse kind of comes from that she fits these 1950s depictions of like housewives that have transcended so many different areas and aspects of internet culture. But Ryan replied and said, this has to be a joke, right? Do these people really think that the liberal equals hating boobs? Haven't conservatives been screaming modest is hottest for years? And now because a woman you find attractive wears a low-cut dress, that's a win for conservatism? Truly incoherent. And I agree with that too, right? Because it's like the whole conservative like tradwife ideology is like your wife is saved for you. Right? Again, as your means of control, of your means of shaping into the person that you want to have. There's this other tweet that says, I absolutely hate when I see other women with takes like this because women have always worked and we just didn't and often still don't get paid for it. This is kind of the thing too with Nara Smith, right? Is she makes a living off of these TikTok videos. So she's still not doing this sort of traditional wife because that would mean she would not be able to take in any income. So the picture in there is Sydney Sweeney again, and I wonder how she feels about being like constantly like roped into these kind of weird conservative discourses. But it says, me after thousands of women fought for my right to work, so now I have to read emails and use Excel every day. Next, we have this tweet from Belle Delphine, which presents her as this like borderline naked fairy lady playing the piano as a damsel in distress, waiting for like a knight to come back to battle. This is just a really strange, like trying to, I don't even know, like put men on a pedestal for like, but she's it's so funny too because she's also an OF girl, which is like the enemy of these people. But when you read the replies, it's just a bunch of verified conservative men going absolutely bananas, which is kind of how it usually is, which is so strange. Kat Tenbarge said, one thing about the current popular Tradwife / housewife depiction is that they aren't actually doing hard, essential domestic labor. You rarely, if ever, see them clean their own giant sparkling kitchens or bathrooms or cook substantial food beyond dessert and special treats. This kind of is at the root of like that frustration with NARS Smith, right? Because it's unrealistic depictions of motherhood. You're not seeing her change diapers. You're not seeing her deal with a kid who puked everywhere. You're not seeing the kid freaking out and screaming and not eating the food that she made for 6 hours. Like, there are so many other like directions in which these things can go into. Then we've got Ian Miles Chong, the greatest of the great, the GOAT of Delulu. So it's a video of Sydney Sweeney again, just having boobs. Like, it's literally just Sydney Sweeney existing with boobs and being blonde and being skinny. The bar is in hell, if I do say so myself. Keeps playing and I can't get to stop because X doesn't work properly. Anyway, thank you, Elon. Love that for us. So he says, wokeness is so finished. These two videos are among the most viral across TikTok and X this week. So one of them is a girl having boobs, and the other is a guy doing drywall. I just want to say, at home, my mom did the drywall, and my dad would make little shrimp palm heart salads. And no, my dad's not gay, because that's something like a weird thing that people will connect to, you know, having passions and having talents outside of direct gender binaries, but alas. Finally, we just have this picture of a guy who looks like he had just put a fork in a toaster with how his hair is standing, and this girl with red lipstick and a very I'm not trying to hate on a baby. It's just like the baby looks not enthused is why I'm laughing. And it literally just says the left hates to see this. What? White people having a kid? I really don't care. What I hate to see is you being annoying. Let's be honest. But this again, these culture wars are called culture wars for a reason. Because they don't actually present any actual realistic discourse, actual like thought-provoking conversations. It is just the constant antagonistic assumptions. Now, this happens on both sides of the political spectrum. I just think conservatives have like a certain special ability to just make it so outlandish all the time. I don't care that you have a kid. It really isn't that deep. But with this and seeing kind of the way that things exist, we'll move to the last part. So part 3 is the dark side of this movement. There are many cons to this process, far beyond the supposed simple difference in opinions that a lot of people boil this down to in comparison to the lifestyles. To begin, if the rights of women are retracted to where they are back in the home, you know, losing the bank account, back in the sort of trad lifestyle, where even the majority of the rights of white women are taken away, this puts all women in a position of danger. Because even if we think in any sort of historically accurate context, even stereotypically, it was incredibly societally acceptable to have women be joked about as a figure of like that domestic violence was a common and funny thing to happen in the home. Because think back, for example, my boyfriend is watching Cheers. I don't know why, and he won't stop. Such a funny thing to look back on, because when there's like the character Clay, I think, he like, my boyfriend was telling me the story that like he dates a girl in the show and they break up a long time ago and he wants to get back together with her, and her kid that she had while they were dating is now of legal age, and he was like, ooh, maybe I want like the 18-year-old when I'm like 50, you know, or 40 or whatever it is. It's like that was like an acceptable plot in a television show, was for a man to seek out someone he knew as a child as a partner, right? Which is something that's so eerie and yucky when you think of these kinds of things now, right? And I fear the state of many women's lives if they're put back into these sort of tradwife positions, because again, even just being pragmatic and thinking economically, it's not sustainable. And there's also the aspect of men desiring these things and perpetuating these values and not being able to provide the environment that women need to exist under. So you want the rights retracted, but you need to keep the specific ones that favor you only in in place so that you can have somehow an even more unbalanced life than what previously existed. It just doesn't make sense from a logical perspective. Then there's this aspect of specifically looking for young women to do this. Now, I saw this TikTok towards the end of the scripting process that I'm going to insert now that perfectly rationalizes like kind of my thought process on this. So when we see this TikTok, there's so much more than just, I want to have kids. This is a choice of my lifestyle. This is a choice of my whatever. Because if we think about this sort of like pick-me girl and how they're not even being seen as desirable, it's because so much of the control needs to be done for the process of breaking them. They want subservience that they earned. It feels like a conquest. And that becomes so sick to me, and that becomes so terrifying. And the way that it seems like at least the internet is swaying back into this sort of direction, and in turn possibly at least American society, but then if American society expands towards a lot of other areas of the world, it can be like a very dark way to look. And I think what kind of is required is for people to come together, white women, non-men, just in general, non-binary, trans people, etc. Anybody who is not like a cis man in this regard, if even the cis men that believe in that this should not be the way to live, right? To kind of come together and solidify what feminism is, work for each other, be there for each other, uplift those who are further marginalized, and in turn kind of continue strides towards a more equitable and safe environment for everyone. Anyway, because the thing is too, right? If you're a kid in an abusive household, for example, you in turn will suffer consequences. So it even extends to those very heteronormative dynamics, right? Anyway, with that, I'm going to conclude. Today, we talked about the Tradwife phenomenon on the internet and what that is. We talked about NARS Smith and Sydney Sweeney and the tweets and everything, and the kind of recent pinpoints of these sort of evangelical women trying to like uplift these sort of standard conservative dynamics. And we ended with me rambling about how we all need to come together because things are scary. Now, links, sources, ways to support the channel all down below, along with links to my makeup, email to suggest content, social media, all that kind of jazz. I hope y'all have an absolutely amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye!
Chérie, t'es dépressive? Mais pense qu'il y a probablement quelqu'un qui est présentement avec ton ex puis qui pense avoir fait le meilleur choix de sa vie. Un message du gouvernement du Canada.